senator from Colorado is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let me just start by thanking the senator from Oregon. He's been a true leader here in the Senate for many years, and I know the senator from New Mexico joins me in thanking you for your leadership and for your partnership. And I rise today, as Senator Wyden has, to celebrate the public lands in Oregon. He rose to celebrate the public lands in his state, and I rise to celebrate the lands in Colorado. And I want to make the point right out of the gate that our public lands support thousands of jobs across Colorado, and they strengthen our special way of life. And this month marks the 50th anniversary of the Land and Water Conservation Fund and the Wilderness Act. Both of these incredibly successful laws have been instrumental in protecting our public lands for future generations, growing our outdoor recreation economy, and ensuring access to public lands in Colorado and all across our country. In sum, what I'm saying, these landmark laws have touched every corner of Colorado over the past 50 years. So I'm very pleased in that spirit to join Senator Wyden and Senator Sessions today in introducing a resolution honoring the 50th anniversary of the Wilderness Act. From the snow-capped peaks of the Eagle's Nest Wilderness and the desert arches of the Black Ridge Canyons Wilderness to James Peak, which I worked hard to establish, the Wilderness Act has protected more than 3.6 million acres in Colorado alone. These places have inspired generations of Coloradans and remind us that we don't inherit the earth from our parents, we borrow it from our children. Mr. President, let me turn to the Land and Water Conservation Fund. In 1964, some 50 years ago, President Lyndon Johnson worked with the Congress to establish LWCF, the acronym for the Land and Water Conservation Fund, to fulfill a basic promise to the American people. That promise is, as we develop our oil and gas resources, we will also conserve other special places throughout our country for the next generations. As we mark 50 years of the program, we can tangibly see and feel and breathe its success. In the 3 million acres LWCF has helped us preserve as a part of 40,000 local park and recreation development projects across all 50 states, as well as over 4 million acres of public lands managed by the federal government. And in Colorado, we've seen firsthand how LWCF dollars have helped protect access to the public lands that define us as a state. Mr. President, from my position as chairman of the National Parks Subcommittee, I've seen how these funds have been particularly useful to our parks. After all, there is no better example than the creation of Great Sand Dunes National Park in Colorado. This magnificent place was protected by LWCF appropriations that were obtained with very strong local support. Great Sand Dunes National Park protects one of our nation's great landmarks, and it's also a critical source of tourist dollars for the surrounding rural communities. And this economic boost is something we've seen all across our state and our nation. It's noteworthy that for every dollar coming out of the LWCF fund, we see created 4 times that much in economic value. $1 equals $4 in economic value. And this investment through the LWCF program is part of the reason we've seen strong growth in America's outdoor recreation industry. When I say outdoor recreation industry, that's activities like hunting and fishing, camping, skiing, biking, you name it. And those activities have generated over $13 billion that support over 124,000 jobs in Colorado alone. In another vein, Mr. President, LWCF resources have helped states like ours become more resilient when it comes to natural disasters. And I was last weekend in Lyons, Colorado, which was one of the towns that was hardest hit by Colorado's historic 2013 floods. And this photograph here is one of the numerous examples of what we faced for about 3 days last fall, a year ago. Trout Unlimited has shared a story of how LWCF funds were used to help recover from a similar flood in the neighboring Big Thompson Canyon 30 years ago. Back in 1976, local officials had the foresight to make an LWCF purchase of 80 flooded properties and to replace the damaged homes with new parkland, which then provided fishing access to the community and critical floodplain protection. Why do I bring that up now? Well, that $1 million investment in 1976 helped families who had lost their homes then and avoided an estimated $16 million in property damages in 2013 that would have happened without those preservation efforts. The Big Thompson Canyon, Mr. President, flooded in a similar fashion last year as it did in 1976. But because of the LWCF monies and the fact that 80 flooded properties were purchased, there weren't buildings, there wasn't human activity in those areas, and we saw the result. It was a way to rebuild smarter and better in 1976, and we're going to do that going forward from 2013's flood. As a part of that, I was really excited and pleased to hear that the town of Lyons recently received $350,000 of LWCF funding to repair and rebuild the spectacular St. Vrain River Corridor Trail. Before that trail was destroyed last fall in the flood, it had been used as a regional connector for anglers and cyclists, kayakers, mountain bikers, and many others. And this project will now help restore a vital economic asset for that community, and it will ensure access to the river and the river corridor for many generations to come. That's a success story, pure and simple. And Mr. President, LWCF has helped in many other less obvious ways. As we fight to get our kids and ourselves to spend less time in front of the television, outdoor recreation is still the best way to stay physically fit and active and emotionally healthy. This past July, I rafted the Browns Canyon Wilderness Study Area of the Arkansas River. As you can see here, what a spectacular place. What a unique place Browns Canyon is. And I have proposed to preserve it permanently as the Browns Canyon National Monument and Wilderness. And along on that rafting trip, we had a group of veterans. And several of them are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD as we know it. And they told me how they used their time outdoors as a part of their healing. Again, a success story. So how do we keep LWCF strong? Even though LWCF has been successful by any measure while enjoying strong bipartisan support, the program's only been fully funded 2 times since its enacting law in 1964 promised $900 million in annual funding. That's right, only 2 times out of the last 50 years. LWCF is a victim of the uncertainty of the annual appropriation cycle, which leaves a huge unmet need in Colorado and across our country. And that's why I've been fighting, joined by many of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, for full permanent funding of the Land and Water Conservation Fund. And I'm very pleased to be working with Senator Wyden and Senator Heinrich and others on a fix that will fulfill the LWCF promise. This is a promise to our kids, our grandkids, and all generations down the line. And we have an obligation to keep it. Now, the good news is, Mr. President, this potential fix would also reauthorize and fund 2 other programs that are critical to our rural communities. The Payment in Lieu of Taxes program, which is also known as PILT, and Secure Rural Schools. Let me talk briefly about both of those programs. For decades, the PILT program has provided critical funding to nearly 1,900 rural counties to make up for diminished tax revenues stemming from federal land ownership within those county boundaries. PILT helps ensure rural communities have access to basic services such as law enforcement, education, and health services. Let me share an example. Eureka County, which is in southwestern Colorado, is still recovering from the economic downturn and the corresponding 36% drop in property tax collection. The county has already cut staff time significantly by reducing county operations to only 4 days a week. Without PILT, that would drop to just 3 days a week. PILT also ensures that the county can hire a sheriff and that students can get to school. Now, unfortunately, permanent funding for this program expired, and PILT now experiences the uncertainty of short-term fixes, creating significant planning challenges for Colorado and rural Americans. I was proud to lead the effort last year to extend PILT funding through the Farm Bill, which delivered $34.5 million to Colorado communities. But here in the Congress, we've got to do more. We've got to confront this annual uncertainty over the future of the PILT program. That's why I've championed a separate bill that would permanently fund PILT. This is also a bipartisan effort. And that's why I've worked with Senator Wyden to include such certainty in this comprehensive bill today. I mentioned the Secure Rural Schools program, and the same could be said of it. Rural Colorado communities rely on the Secure Rural Schools program to hire teachers and strengthen our education system. In 2013 alone, Colorado communities where one teacher can make or break a school received $9.5 million through this vital program. So this important bill for our secure rural schools would ensure that the federal government keeps its commitment to our rural counties to help offset the cost of public education, roads, and other essential services. So we have a dynamic trio of very important programs: LWCF, PILT, and Secure Rural Schools. They help support Colorado's rural communities in our special way of life. Now, Mr. President, let me conclude with this theme. We are a nation of risk takers and explorers. We've always been searching for the next challenge to overcome or the next mountain to climb. And our public lands are a reminder of that heritage. And finding the right balance for how to use our public lands is the next challenge to overcome. As we tackle problems like growing our economy, disaster response, and taking care of our wounded warriors, let's not forget the important role of our public lands and the opportunities they provide for outdoor recreation, our economy, and our health. This year, let's reflect on what President Kennedy called intelligent use of natural resources. Let's celebrate 50 years of the Land and Water Conservation Fund with bipartisan action for full and permanent funding for LWCF, PILT, and secure rural schools. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.